Hey guys, and welcome to another video. This one is just going to be a reactionary to the opening season game between the Ravens and the Chiefs. I had predicted that I thought the Ravens had a really legitimate shot to win this game. I do still think that, it was really more in their court than it looked last night, even being down 10 at the end of the game. Partially because of a few reasons. It's kind of obvious that with Xavier Worthy essentially getting, his second touchdown of the night, which is essentially was a free touchdown. Like it didn't even matter really that he's, as fast as he is. It's one of those things that to me, if they don't blow that coverage, let's say they give up a field goal there, then the Ravens, and it plays out exactly the same minus the touchdown, then potentially the Ravens are just kicking a field goal at the end to tie it instead of having to go for a tie or presumably the win, since Harbaugh looked like he was going to go for two if Likely had secured the touchdown and not had his toe essentially out of bounds. Now, covering the game itself, here are some thoughts that I had while watching it. Chris Jones still looks like he's in playoff mode. He doesn't look like he has regressed at all. Obviously, he was, picking his battles for the most part, lining up on the end, lining on the inside, doing stunts to the outside against a Ravens O-line that for the most part struggled a lot more than I thought they would struggle. Granted, they have new pieces, but I still think Linderbaum is one of the best centers in the league. And Stanley, despite getting all the formational penalties that he got, still one of the best tackles in the league when healthy. Looking at Lamar, you could definitely tell that, oh my God, he's very small, very sleek. We obviously have always known that he can run, but he was essentially carrying the team on his back for the most part. I will say that Isaiah Likely, was his partner in crime tonight. And if you told me that Mark Andrews was going to have crazy limited snaps tonight and he wasn't really going to play, I would have been like, that seems kind of ridiculous since he is fully healthy and with no limitations. But it seems maybe the Ravens were like apprehensive about playing him a ton. I think now with the way that this game was played, I think it's much more likely that they have Likely and Andrews and then Bateman and Flowers in the game a lot more, running twin tight end sets in order to bolster the run game and run it better with Henry. Because that was one thing that I said, is I thought the run game was going to be a little bit better with Henry. He obviously in this game seemed like much more of a smoke screen than anything, not even eclipsing 50 yards, 3.5 yards a carry, and not getting very many touches besides in the first drive, which it was a slow start for him, but he did get a touchdown at the end and off of, a couple of decent runs where the offense also had to come away from adversity where, they get these, formational penalties, which seems like they might become a serious thing. I hope not. I hope that, that kind of put the rest of the league on notice and teams are going to do that, because it's kind of a, like, do you want to win on defense because the offense is just committing essentially like a false start penalty, but it's how they're lined up, instead of like false starting because it's a 5-yard penalty. But Zay Flowers with a good game. He was doing really well. I think there were some times that I think that the Ravens called poor plays to try and convert. The one that I'm really thinking about was on 4th down where they're like, oh, they got the matchup. They have Zay Flowers lying right behind the line. He goes out on sort of a oddball screen look, But to me, it just didn't seem like it was going to work because you're up against, a Chiefs team that, if anything, they're very good at tackling and wrapping guys up and playing aggressive. And it's like, if it was any other cornerback besides McDuffie, maybe it works. But it was McDuffie, who is, obviously the Chiefs' best corner, not because Snead is gone. But looking at the defense of the Ravens, I think, they still did really well. Obviously, their head coach, I had no idea he was 32 years old, but it's like, it's wild. The dude is a few years younger than I am. And I'm like, what? And he's been, and I knew he was a former player, but I didn't realize within the last 10 years. And then he started coaching immediately afterwards. But did a very good job. I think the blown coverage probably isn't on him. It's probably more on like maybe Humphrey, maybe the safety. You really don't know unless you ask him. I guess I haven't looked at I'm sure it was asked about in like press conferences, but who's to blame, type of thing. And it's week 1. These types of things can happen. I'm sure it's not the last one we're going to see where you see 2 guys go deep, one to the middle and one to the right, and then 2 DBs happen to just go and cover one guy where they're like, oh no, you were supposed to stay on this guy who's going to this area. You just left him completely open. It happens week 1 because, new NFL season, it's like preseason week 4 for some teams, or it's like the gimme week, Some teams look better, than they are, week 1 because of this. Some teams look a lot worse than they do because of this. But, it is what it is. And it ultimately, had its own way to shape how the game, came out. I do think it's crazy how Jackson said that he thought it was still a touchdown. I feel for you. I wish it had been a touchdown. I was pulling for the Ravens, who they played a solid game. They played, a pretty solid game. They made enough plays to, essentially be able to potentially beat the Chiefs, having given them essentially a free touchdown to Worthy. And they competed against a defense, a Spagnuolo-led defense that, has been sound for years, where it's like led by Chris Jones, Chenal, McDuffie, and then Watson, the cornerback, whom I wasn't really aware of, but I was like, this guy is playing, he's making plays, he is not letting the Ravens bully him at all, and definitely made some key plays that impacted the game. Looking to the Ravens and Lamar a little bit, they clearly kind of were uneasy about their O-line, and they obviously don't want to risk Lamar, even though he did do quite a bit of running and he looks really slippery. But, perhaps they're going to tell him that he should be sliding more, or they just need to do a little bit more, I think, in the run game, besides him, obviously. And I think that will come. Their line will get more gelled. They seem to be a bit either calmer or, more settled in at the end of the game. But you could also say the Chiefs look tired. Conditioning is always kind of a thing early in the season, until you're like in the thick of it, and then you're just locked in, until later in the season. But I think that both of these teams are very good. It wasn't a perfect game either by any stretch, but I think we should obviously we should expect both of these teams to be, contenders, and that you can't really knock either team. Obviously, I do think that the Ravens and what they ran for their scheme was exploited by the Chiefs a number of times. I think that they need to work on tackling a little bit, but the thing that I will say is that Rashee Rice and Isaiah Pacheco are just those kind of guys that they make guys miss. Like Pacheco, especially with the way he stutter steps, does his jukes and his maneuvers and then, essentially start going downhill after, making guys miss that, could have had him in the backfield. But overall, I just think that, the Ravens, their defense is still obviously pretty good. They put plenty of pressure on Patrick Mahomes. And I mean, that was behind, an O-line where, yes, their right tackle, Jawan, got flagged a lot last year and had a couple of penalties this game. But their rookie, I can't pronounce his name, I'm not going to say it, left tackle, looked very good, and they were leaving him alone over there. And while, obviously the Ravens are without who their sack leader was last year, Clowney, I think that Odafe Owe was doing well. I think, obviously, Mandabik was getting pressure. Michael Pierce, they were like, oh, he only had one sack last year, which he's not. He's more of a run stuffer with his size, but he gets pressure. I think that they're going to be fine in terms of that. Maybe they can run some other disguise stuff to send, their other middle linebackers besides Roquan in for blitzes or something if they need to get something that, so they feel an impact from him. I think that Roquan played well, obviously penalized early with a horse collar, but, it was a very, obviously the pick that he got, was kind of free. It was thrown right to him. I'm not sure what Mahomes saw, but it's like, you see those occasionally, even with the great quarterbacks, where it's like, what did you see here? And it's bizarre. But otherwise, for the Chiefs, I think I've already kind of covered it. Pacheco, obviously, we know him as I call him an Energizer Bunny style player because it's like a lot of energy, isn't going to ever quit on a play. We obviously saw that too with him tumbling over two guys, literally rolling over them, getting up, and then getting 3 more yards or whatever it was with his teammates pushing him. It was like some weird, surreal thing that I'm like, oh yeah, this totally happens. Sometimes players try to do things like that where they try to roll over, but they end up hitting their elbow on the ground or something, but it doesn't really happen. But yeah, this game had a little bit of it all. Very good entertainment, very good offense, good defense though too. It just was inconsistent, and that's kind of what, week one kind of is sometimes, even between contending teams. But it was definitely better. I definitely feel like it was better than last season's season opener between the Lions and Chiefs. That was just kind of a joke. It was a drop fest. But that is one other point that I'll make is numerous players had drops again on the Chiefs. Pacheco had that one on the sideline that they were like, oh, it was too far. And I'm like, the dude had a hand on it. He had enough hand. It's just his other hand wasn't situated correctly on it. And it's like, that could have been a big play, but overall some things that, both teams have to clean up. Who knows too? Even Travis Kelce had another drop this game. Juju had a drop on what should have been a pass to the 1 yard line, which could have been another touchdown. So, definitely missed opportunities on each side. But otherwise, that's my opinion on the game. It definitely was, gritty in its own way, but in a sloppy sense. I expect both teams to really clean this up. And we might even see a different version of the Chiefs once they have Hollywood Brown back from injury, whenever he comes back, which he'll add another speed element, which they could do so many different kinds of screens with how many players they have. And it seems like, Andy Reid is still dialing up these plays that are oh, they might not, win the game for you, but they're going to constantly chip and, make it a physical game for the other team where they're going to have to take on blockers, more and more and more, depending on how many screens. But tell me, guys, what you thought of the game. I thought it was good. It definitely was a worthwhile ending. I was worried there at the end that, like, the Ravens wouldn't even have their shot, to be honest, but their defense stepped up when they needed them to and showed that they still have, and they have good depth, because even like Kyle Van Noy went out and he was out for, a couple quarters, with his eye problem, which I'm assuming he won't miss any time. But tell me, guys, what you think. If you like the video, like, comment, subscribe. I'd love to hear what your guys' opinions are, and I'll probably see you guys with a reaction video to tonight's game, which is my Packers playing the Eagles in Brazil, which I'll say, go Pack, go.